Hello, my dears. I am at your service in another session of robotics education. And in this session, and from this session onwards, I want to teach you on the topic of controlling the speed of the motor. To help you know how we can control the speed of the motor. Now, where is this motor speed and controlling the speed of the motor useful? For example, we want to move an arm at multiple speeds, or a robot, for example, is moving on 4 wheels or 2 wheels. We want to increase and decrease its speed, for example, move the counter and the counter. All of this requires that you be able to control the speed of the odometer. Controlling the speed of the odometer has many circuits and has many paths, but I'll start here with the simplest possible circuit that you can operate and understand the depth of the circuit, so that later we will become more advanced, and we will do this with different ICs. That is the face of the motor. You can actually work easily because you already have a good support and skill. Well, as usual, we start with a prototype. I will return to the prototype here, and we want to implement a stepper circuit on this prototype to see how we can control the motor speed. First, it is better to know how the speed of the motor is controlled. The more we give more voltage to the motor, the more voltage and current are directly related to each other. Let's give more voltage to the motor. The faster that motor will rotate. The less voltage we give, the slower and slower the motor will move and rotate. But keep in mind one principle that you must keep in mind: the minimum and maximum. The maximum is also more important, the maximum voltage that the motor can use. For example, the reason it is said that the more voltage you give to a motor, the faster it will spin is not because you give a motor, for example, 25 volts of voltage to it, and expect it to spin very quickly. For example, when we say to turn a motor over and over, we mean that we start from the maximum voltage it can use and lower it. For example, if our motor has a maximum voltage that it can use of 12 volts, what we're going to do is we're actually giving it a voltage between 12 volts and 12 volts. So this voltage that we're giving it changes the shape of the motor. So be sure to keep this in mind, because if you don't know this or don't take it into account, your motor will definitely burn out, and the motor of a robot that, for example, walks on 2 wheels will have problems if you give it more voltage. Well, you learned about Protoss in the previous session, and I repeat again that the prerequisite for this session is learning Protoss. You should definitely try to learn Protoss, and the software is very advanced and simple. Here I enter the parts section, and the first thing I need is the engine. I'll import an engine. For example, here. Then the next piece is a potentiometer. I'll type pot here, and you'll see that there are different types of potentiometers that you can choose the model for your needs. But in Protoss, the one we need is. Let's activate it and use it. The active type is there. Look at the part number that I click on. There are different types, but here you have to select the active one so that you can do your simulation correctly. I'll double click on it, and then if we go further down, there is also a potentiometer. For example, if we go further down, there was a model here that had a volume mode. I'll find it. These are, for example, potentiometers, which in a way can be said to be potentiometers, volume modes, and we can use them as the same volumes that we all have, as you can see in this image. Now, to see how this volume works, I will also make the volume 0. And when I supported this volume, another thing we need is a transistor. You can use any type of transistor. For example, I am using BC, which is one of the simplest transistors. I use and select it, and I think it is complete. So let's start the work like this. First, we place our motor here, like this. Then we will place the transistor, because the transistor plays a very important role in controlling the speed of the motor like this. Then we will come and select the potentiometer first, and we will place it here after the potentiometer. That's it. We will go to determine the voltage. Our circuit. So here I select the ground because we finally need a GND. Then here I also select the DC voltage. That is also from the DC voltage and complete it. So, first of all, for example, I set the voltage to 20 volts. Now in the simulation, we give it a kind of motor every 14 voltages. It doesn't matter in reality. We have to pay attention to its working voltage. So our voltage is 20 volts. I will also come to you with this. For example, I will choose 2 kilowatts because a higher ohm makes it easier to control the speed. Then I ground it, which is ground. What do I do now? I will pay attention to the voltage. I will connect it to the motor like this. I will measure the voltage with a meter. and I will connect it to one side of the potentiometer. I will connect the other side of the potentiometer to ground. I will go to ground, connect the middle leg of the potentiometer to the base of the transistor, and the emitter to ground. Again, check the structure of the circuit. This is how I will do now. I will run the circuit. I will click on Run, and you will see that the motor started to rotate because this potentiometer is in the middle position. I'm zooming in here. Now I'm going to turn the potentiometer towards ground. It looks like I'm turning it towards ground. You see the motor speed is getting slower and slower until the next time it's completely stopped here. It looks exactly like we're turning the potentiometer. This is a kind of simulator. Now I'm going to start slowly moving the potentiometer towards positive again. Pay attention to the speed of the motor. Whatever I have to do, the speed of the motor movement is also getting faster and faster. It's very easy to see in the display, so I'm going to bring it down on the screen again and to be able to show you better. I'm going to plug the circuit in. Here I'm actually going to increase the voltage of the motor voltage. For example, 30 volts like this. I'm going to drive the circuit again. And you see that because the voltage has increased, the motor starts to rotate. Now, as I turn the potentiometer again, you see that the motor rotates faster. For example, if I move it to here, it reaches its maximum speed, which you see here. You can easily make a circuit that controls the speed of the motor. Now, you might say that we don't want to do this manually. So let's actually use a potentiometer so that the robot can move faster or slower. This is exactly right. But as I said, you should first operate this circuit and understand the speed control of the motor well, so that later when we want to go to the circuits that do this automatically or do this with remote control, you should be well acquainted with it and be able to follow it. It will be enough. Those circuits, even the IC that controls the speed of the motor, have a similar structure and actually does this with voltage. Of course, we also have a reason why we actually control the speed of the motor with PWM, which is very similar to the circuit, but its structure is slightly different, which I will explain in the next session. So you saw here how to easily control the speed of the meter. Now for us to implement this circuit in practice and see how it works. Let's go ahead and see how it works when we implement it on the breadboard and how we can increase and decrease the speed of the motor. But before we go, let's test it once with the volume potentiometer that we brought to see how it works. So I'll put this potentiometer here, and then I'll bring this one, the volume potentiometer. This variable potentiometer is exactly like the previous one. One side is connected to the input, and one side is connected to the output. The other side is also connected. In this way, when I turn it on, it starts to move. So now I want to show you more practically how we do it using a volume potentiometer. Let's go ahead and see. What is the circuit like? But keep in mind that these files that I started from the previous session and that I am also providing here in Protos. And I have provided you with a file of each session along with the same session, and you can download the video files of this Protos from the link below the description so that you can use it. The only issue is that you must use Protos 8 and above, that is version 8 and above, so that you can actually open these files, because if the Protos version you choose is lower, you cannot use these files. Be sure to keep this in mind. I will return the circuit to the previous state and save it so that I can provide it to you. So let's see what our circuit looks like in practice. As was explained about the construction of the motor speed regulation circuit, and we also implemented it in Protos. Here I also want to show you the actual circuit test, which is actually a potentiometer. It's the same potentiometer that we modified and used in Prototos. Now you can tell from the sound of the motor, just pay attention to this part again, that by turning the potentiometer, I'm changing the rotational speed. I'm controlling this part of the engine. Pay attention. I'm rotating your Romano potentiometer. You see it's spinning at a certain speed. Now it's slowing down. You see it's spinning very slowly now. Now it's speeding up again. And you can easily implement such a circuit. Now, to help you understand it better, I'm going to remove this motor and replace it with a fan that's both easier to see and easier to use. I can explain the circuit more fully for you. So I connected the fan and started turning the potentiometer again. I'll put the circuit here as you're showing so that the fan is better and more visible. Look at the potentiometer as I slowly turn it. The fan starts to move very slowly, and you can see that it starts to spin very slowly. You can even see it spinning very clearly. It is spinning slowly, and now it is increasing its speed. It's quite clear in the picture that its speed has now reached its maximum, and it's spinning at a very high speed. I'll slow it down again. And you see that it needs a lot less voltage as it reaches it, and then it slowly increases the speed again. For example, this is in medium mode. And this is the maximum speed you see here. See again, you can easily build such a circuit. Now I need to tell you that to actually control the speed of the motor, we will use a much more advanced circuit. Regarding the fact that we were able to do this with such a circuit, it is only for your further learning, because in many cases you would have to come and implement the speed control circuit yourself. With the further learning that we will give you in the next session, it will be very easy for you. You will gain more control over this. And for this, you must have known the depth of the circuit, which I'm going to do here, and with the method I'm going to use. I am trying to show you the depth of the circuit's operation at the beginning, so that you can easily use much more creativity. I hope this session was useful for you. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comments so that we can proceed with the training well based on your questions and requests.